welcome to day 2 of Genocide Awareness Week. Had a good start yesterday. Just want to welcome all the NAU students. Great to have you here again this year. Last year when the NAU students showed up, it really made that day pop. Like there's such a good vibe in the room and it's great to have your presence. Want to give a shout out to Dr. Professor Casey back there, Chamberlain, and Alex Alvarez for arranging this and driving down the mountain. And I'm glad that it's not the weather of 3.5 weeks ago when it was like 110. So you don't have to have your perfect Flagstaff weather disrupted. You got a nice day there. So, and we're going to take care of you today. We're going to feed you. And so we've got you. And there's refreshments and snacks outside. One thing I want, if you can remember, I always forget myself personally, the camera, mind the camera, because if you're going past it, try to go underneath it, because that's where our live stream and Zoom's coming from. But at this point, I will turn it over to my friend and colleague, Stanley Mervis, the Director of Jewish Studies here at ASU, to introduce our first speaker this morning, Katalin Steiner.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. It's a great honor to be able to commemorate this day of Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Memorial Day, with a survivor who's with us today. Kathy Gross is a survivor of the Holocaust and also of communism in Hungary. She left Hungary during the revolution in 1956, and I think she'll have I'll let her tell her story herself. I will only say that I had the great pleasure of seeing Kathy throw out the first pitch at a Diamondbacks game back in August. And I really thought that they were going to have her start the game. Really, it was really strong opening. But I think it speaks to the vitality and strength that she carries with her, that she did that with such great grace. So thank you all for being here. And please join me in welcoming Kathy.
Well, good morning. I'm so sorry you had to get up so early and missing the free skiing in Flagstaff, which I heard that you're going to get some snow. My name is Kathy Gross. That's my married name. I was born as Katalin Steiner in June 5, 1938, many, many moons ago, in Budapest, Hungary. My father's name was Erno Steiner, and my mother's name was Magdolna Blyer Steiner. On the photo, you could see my father. He was about 5 years old. He was born in 1896. It sounds like many centuries ago. The next photo is my father in his teenage years. Oh, you missed it. With his parents. And that's my grandmother and my grandfather. I've never met my grandfather. My grandmother was very dear to me. She lived till age 89. My parents, my father came from the country, ended up in Budapest, established himself and ended up owning a textile factory. He did very well financially. She ended up marrying my mother. That is their engagement photo. My mother was a beauty queen in a small town in Hungary, and my father was 14 years older, and that's their marriage certificate. Handwritten, this is the copy of the original. My mother comes from a place called Kalocha, which is fairly famous town right by the Danube, famous for paprika. When my parents got married, they moved to Budapest since my father had his business there. They were married September 6, 1931. In the this is their whatever's left of their wedding picture. In those, they may have had a formal one, but that's kind of torn up and tattered. I don't know how it survived the war. It may have been somewhere hidden. My mother moved to Budapest, and in 1932, my sister was born. Her name was Livia, and I think the other one is me. I came along 6 years later. Before the war, we had a pretty good life. Since my father was doing very well financially, we had a maid and we had a nanny who was supposed to teach us German, because in those days it was the leftover from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And at one time in Hungary, the official language was German, not Hungarian. Interestingly enough, I never learned any German, nor did my mother. Somehow I was too young and was too busy playing. Let's see what the next picture is. This is my sister and I. These are all professional photographs. As you can see, we were very close. It looks like I was a little doll in her arm since the age difference. And then my sister survived the war. I tell you later the story. Let's see. When the winds of war started from 1935 on, this is the map of Budapest, map of Hungary. As you can see, the largest lake of Europe is right there on the right-hand side, most of left-hand side. Most of the people are not aware that the small country of Hungary has the largest lake of Europe. The Danube kind of cuts the country in half, and this is just 1/3 of the original size of Hungary. Hungary was 2/3 bigger, but because they were on the wrong side, the German side at World War I, the enemy decided that because Hungary was a side of Germany, they decided to slice off 2/3 of Hungary. So Hungary lost a large part of Transylvania, a large part of Ukraine, a huge part of Yugoslavia, Croatia, all around. Hungary got to be a very small country. Again, that's history. Most people are not aware of it because it's only at 10 million people right now. So it's really one of among the small countries of Europe. However, very much in the news, as you're probably aware of. In about 1939, the winds of war started to hit Hungary. All kinds of rules came into Hungary. Jews were not allowed to own any property, any valuables. They had to give up bicycles, valuables, radios. They're not allowed to own any businesses. So my father was forced to have a partner and the factory run on his name so he could carry on with his business. The Germans were not there, but the Hungarian Nazi regime was very much of the side of the Germans, and they tried to carry on the discrimination of the Jews. So in 1941, they started to establish labor camps in Hungary, and they collected able-bodied Jewish men under 50, and they took them to labor camp. This is the building where I used to live in all my life in Hungary. On the right-hand side, the top floor apartment where I lived for 18 years. My father was taken to a labor camp, and he wasn't a well man. He had problems with his stomach. He had stomach ulcers, so the lack of decent food and diet wasn't available in the labor camp, so he wasn't really enjoying very good health. But sometimes in 1942, he came home on a furlough, and these are, sorry for interrupting, these are the only photo I have of my grandparents. My maternal side grandfather, my grandmother, and actually that's my mother. And I don't know if it's me or my sister. And then the next lady is my fraternal grandmother. And this must be an aunt there. I don't know who she is. I've never seemed to recollect who she may have been. It's an old photo. I don't know how it surfaced. But anyway, my father came home for a furlough, and they took us. This is my sister and I in the park, and this is the three of us, my sister and I, ice skating. You may find it interesting that people are fully dressed with hats and coats on the ice skating rink. But this must have been in the 40s. So when my father came home on a furlough, they decided to go on a vacation place. And here we are, my sister and I, on a sleigh ride. At first, my father just took my mother. The two of us would have like a fast getaway. And then when they got to the place, my father decided that he couldn't possibly be without his children. So he sent a cab to pick us up, and we joined them at the vacation place up on the mountain.
The ghetto?
This in when the war progressed, then the Hungarian Nazis decided that Jews should be going into ghettos. And when the German invasion came, they started collecting, first from the countryside, all the Jews. They put them into cattle cars and transported them to Auschwitz and other labor camps, other concentration camps, actually. In Auschwitz, when by the time the cattle cars arrived, a large percentage of people passed away. They were without food, without water, without any facilities. They just had a bucket in the corner to do their necessities. And when they got off the transport, they were sorted. And they decided that people who were able-bodied and could work in the German factories, they put them on one side, and the rest of the people immediately taken to take a shower. They made them take all their clothes off. They put them into a huge room. They closed the door, and they were gassed and killed, every one of them. The shoes that they left outside, they told them to tie the shoes together, so when they come out, they will find it. However, those shoes that were useful were immediately transported back to Germany to the poor people. And of course, those people died in those gas chambers, and from then on, they were taken to the crematorium. When my grandparents were sent in the transport, they were able to throw out a postcard. Somebody found it and mailed it to my mother. So unfortunately, she was aware what happened to her parents. So in 1940, the end of 43, they've taken to my father away from the labor camp and moved him to a concentration camp, to somewhere in Germany. Eventually, I found out what happened, but first I'm going to tell you what happened to us. In Budapest, they decided that they're going to put all the Jews together in various houses, which they designated as ghettos, and they concentrated Jewish families in the ghettos. So they made the Jewish families move together, several families close in one apartment, so they could account on them, to be able to account for them. So we were left, my mother, my grandmother, my sister, and I, and then we were lucky enough to have another friend move in, a mother and her son. So at that point, we were 6 of us in my apartment. Until my mother found out that her brother was somewhere in Budapest, and she decided to go and take some food to him. It was in a brick factory where they collected Jews for further transportation to take them to various either labor camps or Auschwitz. So my mother got on a tram. She took some food to my uncle, and the Germans found out that my mother was on the tram, and they caught her. They sent her home. They told her to pack, and they'll come and collect her the next day. My mother was very resourceful. She found out that a friend of a friend was an ambulance driver, and decided that they're going to fake that she took poison. They took her to the hospital, pumped her stomach, and that way she survived at that round to be taken away. So she came back home from the hospital. Unfortunately, a couple of days later, they came and got her, and the other lady who also lived with us. And we were left with me and her. My sister was also taken away on a march, and we were left, me and my friend Gabor, who was 2 years older, that was moved into our apartment. I was only 5 years old, so my memory is kind of sketchy, but somewhere along the line, they came and collected us. And I found out later that it was a Jewish organization that collected abandoned children, and they took us to the other part of Budapest, actually Buda, and hid them in a villa. And I don't remember how many of us were crowded in there, but there were a couple of dozen Jewish children in a very small apartment. We didn't have, the food was pretty scarce. There was no electricity, no running water, and we had to be, all our hair was shaved off, and we had lice and all kinds of things on our body because the sanitation was minimal. It was a very cold winter. They washed us with snow, and they melted snow and boiled it for drinking water. And mostly we ate like dry legumes, like not rice, just beans and maybe lentils, until the Russian liberation came. In about February 1945, the Germans arrived, but in between, while we were there in hiding, several times the Germans tried to take us away, but they were bribed either with food, either with booze or money. I really don't know because my memory is somewhat sketchy. The only thing I remember that my finger got infected, they had to take one of my nails off. I do remember it because it was very painful. When my mother found me, my hand was in a sling, and here I was, 3 layers of clothes on me, and my head was bald, and it was a very scary sight. And she's trying to take us home, but because of the fight between the German and the liberators, they blew up all 7 bridges between Pest and Buda. I don't know if you're aware of it, but Budapest is 2 cities, and it's connected with bridges. There is an island in the middle, but at that time, there were no bridges left. So we were coming home in a rowboat with floating ice on the Danube, and that horses swimming, and it was pretty sad situation. They took us home to our apartment, which happened to be that apartment that you saw, the building was next to that building. You can't see it, but that they already built another building there. There was an empty lot, and it happened to be an ammunition depot. Well, Americans found out it's an ammunition depot, and they dropped about 10 bombs on there. And luckily, it's only our roof that burned off, but the apartment stayed intact. So we could come home to the apartment, but only one room was livable. And here we were with my mother, my grandmother, my sister and I in one of the small rooms, which used to be the maid's room. We stayed there, but there was no food in Budapest. So my mother decided that maybe we should go down, my grandmother, my sister and I, we should go down to Kalocsa in the country, because in the country they still had food. And my grandparents kind of hid some food with other people. So they decided that there'd be food for us. So my mother stayed in Budapest to try to get up our apartment renovated. And we were down there. But at one point, they decided that my sister should come back to Budapest to take an exam so she could go back to school to continue her education. On the train, unfortunately, she contracted polio, and within a week, she died in my mother's arm. They didn't tell us for another week until everything was, my sister was buried, and we came back to Budapest to find my mother in a terrible condition, extremely tragic, seeing her child die in her arm and grieving for her family that was all lost in the war. She did find out that her brother disappeared and my father died in Flossenburg in a concentration camp. She tried to rebuild a life, and very slowly rebuilt the factory. She sold my grandparents' property in the country. She rebuilt the factory, and in 1948, she remarried. And I have a stepfather, and in 1949, my brother was born. And life was good for a few months when the communists decided that my mother was a capitalist. They took away her factory, gave her a piece of paper, and then the poverty came. The communist regime was in full force. When I went to school, I finished elementary school. This is, I'll tell you about this later. In the elementary school, I did pretty well. I think I was third in the class, but because of my capitalistic background, they decided I am not allowed to continue my education, and the only education they allowed me to continue was a trade school. So I graduated as a shoemaker with a diploma. And I was extremely disappointed. I wanted further education, but going to university was out of the question because I was an enemy of the communist regime. So in 1956, after the revolution, the borders were kind of scarcely habited with soldiers. So I was able to leave Hungary and ended up going to London, and I was a refugee there for 5 years. And in 1962, I came to the US, got married, and I had a daughter. I have a daughter. After she got married and lived and worked in Paris, we decided that my mother's last wish was that I should find out the concentration camp where my father was. So with my daughter and her husband, we went to Flossenburg, to the concentration camp, and there is a handwritten record of my father, his birth and his date of death, which was November 20th, 1944. The administrator was very kind, and as a thought, I asked that perhaps he knows something about my uncle, because my mother always thought that my uncle may come back somehow, maybe from Russia or somewhere. She had no idea what happened. So I asked that, is there any chance that maybe my uncle was there in Flossenburg? And lo and behold, they had the paperwork that he was also there where my father was. Of course, there is no record whether they ever met. And then I said, and then what happened? And they took it upon themselves, the administrator there, that they researched, and it took them a few months, but they told me what happened to my uncle. And he was moved to several other concentration camps and ended up passing away on a death march in 1945, March 12, April 12. No, I think it was March. So unfortunately, my mother was dead already, so I was not able to tell her that I found her brother. So in 1974, I came to Phoenix. I immigrated from New York and started to work. I had a choice of working either as a sales manager, because I did that in New York at Macy's, or I could be a travel agent, which I also started to study as a travel agent. And I ended up working as a travel agent for $2.50 an hour and worked my way up and took a class. I was one of the first in Phoenix become a certified travel agent after a 2 years course, which was university accredited at that time. And in 84, I ended up opening my own business. And here I am, surviving. And this picture is my daughter and my grandson, who just graduated 2 years ago at the Colorado School of Mines. That's why he looks like a miner. And at his graduation outfit, and here I am with my significant other, kind of fitting under his arm, and being a very proud grandmother that my grandson graduated as a metallurgical engineer. So the picture of this gentleman is Gabor, who was hiding with me during the war, and we kept up the friendship. And he visited in Phoenix, I visited him, he ended up in Berlin. He's got 2 children. That's his wife and one of his daughters. He's still alive, and we are still in touch. And I always felt that we were related, maybe because of the circumstances that we shared. And recently he told me that he went on one of these ancestry sites, and they established that somehow or other we are related. So I always felt we were, but it was a very interesting development. He still is going to be 90 years old, but he's still alive. So I don't know if I left anything out. That's the most I can tell you, and I'd be more than happy if you have any questions.
Thank you for being here today. Why did you come to the United States?
I lived in London. It was not an easy life because my parents were able to join me in 1958, but because of lack of language and because of their age, I needed to work and help them financially. And in 1962, I decided to maybe go to New York and meet a friend which I met in Austria when I left Hungary in 1956, and we ended up getting married. And became a citizen.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience. I just had a practical question. Maybe I missed it, but you said that your mother was taken away, so you had to go to the home for abandoned children, but then your mother was able to return to you. So I was just wondering if you could tell us a little more about your mother's experience and how she was able to survive.
I'm sorry, I left that out.
That's
My
right.
mother was taken away. She was taken on a march. She marched all the way to the close to the border of Hungary. And on her way, a farmer approached her in a horse cart and offered to hide her for money and jewelry. And my mother took a chance, and she and her friend who was hiding, who was also in our apartment, Gabor's mother, they were hiding in their attic. After the Nazis came and threatened that they're going to kill anybody who is hiding Jews, they were able to find false papers. And as Aryans, they went back to Budapest and they were hiding out in a bombed out apartment. My mother was a survivor. And it really surprised me because she was a spoiled trophy wife. And all of a sudden, she was able to pull herself together and, I guess, wanting to live, give her the strength to survive.
Other questions in the room?
Okay, there's one online.
Okay.
Okay, this person wants to know if what method did you use to stay hidden for so long? Like were you guys walking around the city? Like, were you moving location to location? And how did you do that without being found out?
Well, we were locked into that place. We didn't go anywhere. The doors were locked. We didn't go anywhere.
Do you know for how long was that?
Several months. To be honest with you, I was traumatized. I was 5 years old, and I forgot to mention, but before I went, there were major bombing in Budapest. So the sirens were very loud, and almost every night we had to run down to the cellar of the apartment building, and there was no electricity. The elevators did not work. So the whole apartment buildings, people who lived there, everybody were crowding into the stairways, and we were running down to the cellar. And one time the bombing was so fierce that in the courtyard of the house, pieces of burning wood and everything was flying down. And when we were in the cellar started to be in danger. And somehow, and I don't know whether it's a European thing or not, but the apartment buildings had common firewalls. And in the cellars, there was a small wall which had loose bricks, and they could knock the loose bricks over. And I remember us climbing through that hole from one cellar to another cellar. And we were racing from one cellar to the other to save our lives. So the sirens and the fires remained in my memory. So I am very sensitive to loud noises.
Thank you. Is it on? Thank you so much for coming here today.
You're welcome.
My question was, I recall you mentioning that when the communist regime took power in Hungary, how your family lost the factory, the business, and how you weren't able to continue your education as you wanted to. Were there any other ways that you and your family were treated differently under the communist regime?
Any other way to?
That you and your family might have been treated differently after the war?
There was no other way because the communist regime was in power and they knew everything. And apparently, the principal of my elementary school used to teach my sister in the Jewish school. So she knew exactly what my background was. So I couldn't even lie about that. And even though I was deemed as an orphan because my father was killed, I had no privileges.
Thank you.
Thank you for your story. I was wondering, did you mention that your family was compensated for the factory when they took your factory over financially? And also, I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about how your
The
lifestyle.
compensation was a piece of paper that attested that they took it. So that piece of paper I still have.
And I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about how the lives of people changed, after communism took over versus previous to the war.
Well, it's really hard. Excuse me, may I have a little water? Was unimaginable the way life was during the communist regime. You had to obey, you had to do whatever the communists told you. Education was, they changed the history books every single year. We were forced to wear the red scarf around our neck, and we were forced to demonstrate. We were demonstrating against the Korean War. We were demonstrating for the Russian Revolution. We were forced to learn the communist. We were forced to learn Russian. I learned Russian for 8 years from the same book. Nobody wanted to learn it, so they used the same book over and over again, and people really sabotaged, but you had to do it, and there were no other languages allowed, so we all learned Russian, and we had all these seminars where they were really pushing the communism, and they told us that that's the only way of life, and if you don't work, you don't eat. And we were very restricted, even in our thought process. I mean, children that grew up, they were even younger than me, they don't even know that there is another world. You were not allowed to listen to Western radios. You were not allowed to listen to Western music, and you had to obey. School was 6 days a week from 8 o'clock till 5 in the afternoon. In my trade school, we had to work in a factory, and they taught us to first year we made shoes right on our thighs. We were banging on our thighs, and we were using all kinds of chemicals and stuff that really nowadays you wouldn't even be allowed to be exposed to. That was the first year. The second year, they put us into a factory where they taught us to use every single machinery in a shoe factory, and we were actually working on the assembly line. And every summer, we had to work at least 1 month. And we had to learn machine drawing, and we had to, it was no choice. In other words, we were singing and dancing, and that was all Russian.
Thank you so much for telling your story. Earlier, you mentioned that in Hungary, you weren't able to pursue higher education at a university. I was wondering, in your time in London or the United States, were you able to pursue a higher education?
I would have, except I didn't have a chance. I really couldn't afford it. The only further education was when I was in Phoenix, that I took this class to become a certified travel agent. In England, the British government let us go to college and learn, but my English was non-existent. So it was so poor that I was unable to qualify to do any higher education until my language knowledge was such that I could. But by then, I had to work.
Thank you for being here. So you mentioned that your mother was able to rebuild your family's factory by selling property from your grandparents in the country.
Yes.
Can you, if you know, can you explain how your family managed to retain property and valuables throughout the war?
Whatever little the property, they couldn't take away, because they couldn't take away a house. They looted it, but they couldn't take away the house nor the store. My grandparents had a wholesale retail grocery store on the main street in Kalocha. So my mother was able to sell the real estate as such. And the factory, as such, the building remained. So from the money that she had, she put it into the factory and rebuilt it. And some valuables were also buried. I mean, the upper middle class Jews before the war were pretty well to do. So they were able to kind of hide away some of the stuff.
Okay, we got a couple questions online.
Yeah.
Lisa will do, and then 1, 2 more in the room.
Okay. So I'm going to ask one, let you answer, and then I'll ask the other one. Okay. Thank you for your powerful testimony. How did you cope emotionally during the time in hiding, and what kept you going?
It's hard. I'm still coping, okay? I could not figure out what was happening to me. I was already traumatized with the bombing, and I don't remember, and I'm still questioning, how come I didn't miss my mother? Or if I did, I don't remember it. And I couldn't process what it meant to lose my father and to lose my sister. At age 6, I didn't know what the meaning of death is. I'm still processing it. I'm still, in my mind, I have this thought, and the word is what if. What would have happened in my life if there was no war and we could live our lives the way it was? I almost thought that I'm going to write a book about this with the title What If, but it never happened.
After living through both a genocide and an authoritarian regime, how has that impacted the way that you view other types of injustice and other genocides around the world?
Well, I happened to read about other genocide, starting with the Armenian. I read a very powerful book called The 7 Days of Musadag, which is the Armenian genocide. And I do feel that racism, genocide, discrimination should not have any place in our society. People should be brought up that we are all equal and we are all God's people that should help each other and accept each other as they are. And the reason I'm here now is to let you know that everybody should think about it, that genocide and Holocaust should never happen again. And we shouldn't have to live through discrimination. We should be valuing human life, and we should be valuing each other and accepting perhaps each other's shortcoming and each other's looks and beliefs. And people should be more accepting, and people should like each other, or at least make an effort to.
Having grown up in Nazi-occupied Hungary and then communist Hungary, did you experience any culture shocks when moving to London and the United States?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The culture shock was very interesting because more things were available, which I didn't even know existed in Hungary. But on the other hand, when I went to London, London was still reeling after the war because of the Blitz. The British really didn't get over the war by 1956, which was very interesting because goods were readily available, like in the supermarket, but nobody would buy butter because they got so used to margarine during the war that the 6 different kind of butter was just left on the shelves. Also, what really surprised me, having come from a well-to-do family, we had an apartment with a full bathroom and a half bathroom. I met a friend who got a new apartment after the Blitz, and it didn't have a bathroom. It just had a toilet, and they put a tin tub in the kitchen because quickly the British government just built these houses so they could shelter homeless people who were bombed out, and they didn't want to spend the money to make bathrooms. And most of the houses, the other culture shock was that they had really nice fireplaces, which absolutely did not give out too much heat. And I've never felt so cold in my life because we were watching the fire. It was very beautiful, and our front was burning and our back was freezing. And in England is famous for damp cold. It never gets very cold, but it was always terribly humid. So when you went to bed, you felt like you lying on a wet sheet. So I think in the 5 years I lived in London, I remember only one summer. So I went to also, I was enamored. I loved England while I lived there. When I came to New York, I felt like I'm coming home. In England, I was an alien, and I was going to be an alien for the rest of my life. I wasn't really accepted as a regular citizen. In New York, everybody had an accent. Everybody was very proud where they came from. In England, everybody denied their origin. So there was a humongous difference. I mean, I did like England, but if I would have gone to New York first, I think I would have felt different.
Yes. So I have a very similar question, and essentially what you said at the end, you spent most of your life basically as on the run or on the road or on a flight or just migrating in general. And I'm wondering a little bit, why Phoenix? Why Phoenix in the end of the
Why
day?
Phoenix? Oh, that's easy. Okay. In New York, as a travel agent, I came to Phoenix on a study tour, and it was a 100-degree September day, and we went to Wickenburg, and I felt a warmth. Somehow the warmth hit me. People were very friendly, and somehow or other I liked Phoenix. I felt welcome. And so when I went back to New York, I said, if I ever get divorced, this is where I would like to come. And lo and behold, my husband came home from Europe and mentioned that he wants a divorce. And my answer was, please don't change your mind. And this was in October, and I was here in March and never left. People used to tease me that I was heading to Los Angeles and my car broke down in Phoenix. It didn't happen.
Thank you so much.